That was a wedding. You were just at a wedding. Weddings are beautiful. We do them well at College Church. Several rituals, parts in a wedding that even though you see it 100 times, I don't know how many I've done, but more than that, each one of those is new. It's fresh. How many of you, and I want to be careful because I know there's a number of you in this gathering right now that are not married, and you might be thinking, oh man, this whole morning's going to be about marriage and a wedding. It's not. This is going to be about what a wedding is about. Are you okay? But just so we can poll for a minute, how many of you in this hour have been married more than 10 years? Stand up. Wow, look at this. Experience, collective experience. More than 20, stay standing. This is second service. More than 30. Wow, more than 40. How many years? 45. Wow. Mike? 44. Man. 53. Whoa, my goodness. Mike? 49. Wow, you're almost there. Let's give this. I missed you all the way in back. Is that, I didn't see who it was. I think it's, ask him. If he knows, those roles are reversed. Yeah. Man, I was just going to walk around and ask you one-on-one, but I thought they'd put you on the spot. We, maybe 20 years ago, we put all of the couples in College West into a room that were married more than 50 years. And there were 44 couples just in our congregation alone. The newspaper was there. They did an article on it. The next day, the paper said that combined, they had over 2,400 years of marriage experience. Isn't that impressive? Or you might say they had 1 year of experience 2,400 times. But it was really impressive when you think about that. Now, as I said, I don't want this to be about a wedding or a marriage, but we're going to rather look through it at something that's larger than that. One of the questions I ask a couple when we plan the ceremony is, there's going to be a lot of people here. What kind of message would you like to convey to the audience? What I'm saying is this ceremony is going to be about you, but it's not only about you. So your audience that comes to celebrate, what would you like them to hear from God if they could get a message? Now, normally, what I hear from them is, well, I think we'd like for the couples in that ceremony to renew their vows for one another. We want them to see how precious and how important marriage is and vows are, because they say marriage is a celebration of love. So then I sometimes will ask, if marriage is a celebration of love, what is love itself a celebration of? And by that time, I've lost them. Nobody planning a wedding wants to think that far down. But what I have in mind, actually, is that the marriage itself, the wedding itself, is bigger than just the people in it. St. Paul called it a mystery. And Dietrich Bonhoeffer, in his sermon from a wedding cell, or his wedding sermon from a prison cell, he said, "This is not your own private love affair. In marriage, you are placed at the post of responsibility before God and the watching world." So clearly, at least in his mind, he sees this is about us, but it's not only about us. So what I'm asking is, what is the greater thing to which a wedding is tied? Because whatever that is, that's what validates this ceremony. It's not just that we really mean this. There is a story bigger than our story. And when we are joined at this altar, we are joining ourselves, not only to each other, but to that bigger story. St. Paul says in Romans chapter 1 that the invisible things of heaven are sometimes made visible by things on earth. In other words, the things that we can see sometimes reveal things that we cannot see. In the 3rd century, Origen said the same thing. He said, things that are unseen in heaven are made visible by things that are seen on earth, because there are patterns on earth that resemble the things of heaven. I think marriage is one of them. I think a wedding is one of them. The trouble is, if it's your wedding, or if you're officiating them like I have, you don't always see that. I mean, you're just worried about your lines and the next movement and who's got what, and if you're the father, who's paying for this. And so there's all sorts of nerves in the room. But if we could just stop and look at what is happening in a wedding, how the bride proceeds from the audience, through the audience, toward an altar where vows are exchanged. That's why you don't do Christian weddings without an altar. That's what sanctifies the vows. From that moment, all of the motion and the words turn from the altar back to the audience. And then the couple is released, husband and wife, back into the body from which they came. When I married my daughter to her husband, this was the moment in the ceremony where I lost it. I was thinking I would lose it in the homily or in the vows. But it was when I got to the sending, because I felt like, man, I put my life into this gal for 22 years, and now she doesn't belong to me anymore. She doesn't belong completely to him. She belongs to him in them. So I had this sense of just take care of her. Don't drop her. You know what I mean? So it's a powerful, powerful movement within a wedding. I want to tell you 2 stories from the Bible that I think will start to answer why is this wedding so important. You know both of these. The first one is in Exodus chapter 19. Israel had just come through the Red Sea, and Egypt is behind them. They're now out in the wilderness, and God pulls Moses aside for the first time. He says, come on up the mountain, I want to talk to you. Moses goes up the mountain, and there God says to Moses, this is what I want you to tell my people. This is the first time he called them a nation. He said, I want you to tell them, remember how I carried you? Remember how I brought you to myself? Although all the world is mine, you will be for me a valuable treasure. It's a feminine noun in the Hebrew that means the most valuable thing I have. God says to the nation, you will be for me priceless. Although I could have anything, I want you. I'm drawn to you. Moses goes down and tells the people, this is what the Lord said. They can't believe it. Moses goes back up the mountain, and the Lord says to him, now here's what I want you to do. I want you to tell the people to consecrate themselves and purify themselves, for on the third day I will come down on the mountain, and I will reveal myself to you, and there I will join myself to my people. So Moses goes down the mountain and he tells the people of God, this is what the Lord said. You should wash your clothes. You should prepare yourself. You should abstain from sexual relations, because on the third day, God is going to come down on this mountain and he's going to reveal himself to us. And he's going to unite himself with us. So this is what the people do. Moses consecrates them. They spend the second day purifying themselves. And then Exodus 19 says, sure enough, on the third day, God descended on the mountain, and the mountain was lit aflame in fire, and smoke billows up from the mountain like smoke from a furnace. And there, God calls Moses up the mountain another time. And he says to Moses, these are the terms. Sometimes we call these the 10 Commandments. But that's a misnomer. What it literally says is these are the 10 words. That we read these as commandments says more about us than it does the words. Up at the top of the mountain, as God comes down to join himself with his people, we hear the words, you shall have no other gods before me. You shall not bow down to graven images. You should not misuse my name. Remember the Sabbath. That's our day. Keep it holy. Honor your mother and father. Do not kill. Do not commit adultery. Do not steal. Do not lie. And do not covet. I like what Scott Hoffman says about commandments. He says, in God's mind, a commandment is always tied to a promise. Let me say that in slow motion, because most of us know only commandments. Whenever you read a commandment in the Bible, you know there is a promise, either implicitly or explicitly nearby. In fact, he calls commandments promises in disguise. So now when God calls Moses and his people to the mountain, which is starting to feel more and more like a platform, and he exchanges vows of a covenant, you hear, no other gods before me, no graven image, because I am your God. This is like a pastor saying to a couple, you will keep yourself only unto her so long as you both shall live, right? You don't give yourself to anyone else. That's what marriage is. I hear that language in the first 3 commandments. No other gods, no graven image, and don't misuse my name. The Sabbath is our day, honor it. And then in the commandments that remain, we have promises hidden near the commandment. Do not kill, because I am the one who gives you life. Do not break your vows, because I keep mine. And I will give you a partner who will satisfy you for the end of your days. Do not steal, because I provide. Do not lie. Because I am truth. Do not covet, because I provide all things. What we have on Sinai are not 10 rigid commandments like this narrow passageway that says you better not step out of bounds here. What we have is a series of vows made in a covenant where God is joining himself to his people and saying, if you will walk like this, you can have a full and beautiful life. Moses comes down the mountain. They write the terms of this in 3 chapters in Exodus 21, 22, and 23. Scholars call that the Book of the Covenant. These are the things the people of God are swearing to do if they're going to live with God. And when he reads them to them, like vows, the people say, everything the Lord has said, we will do. We will obey. Then the Lord says in chapter 24, find 70 elders and bring them up here. I want to see them. Moses collects the 70 elders. And the 70 elders together with Moses and Joshua go back up the mountain. And they are terrified. Because a few days ago, this mountain was on fire. And they're not sure they're going to live. But there is this phrase in Exodus chapter 24 that says, when the elders got to the top of the mountain, there was a sea of sapphire under the feet of God. They saw God, but he did not raise his hand. They saw God. Here it is. And they sat down together and ate and drank. You can't make this stuff up. That sounds more and more like a reception where the groom and the bride sit in the company of friends and eat and drink. When that moment is over, the following chapter, Exodus 25, begins by God saying, now, go tell the people of Israel to build for me a house. I'm moving in. Do you hear what I hear? Or is it just me? I know you may read this story in lots of different ways, but there is a reason the prophet Jeremiah called the wilderness a honeymoon. I hear a betrothal. Even though the whole world is mine, I want you. I hear a ritual of purification. The bride gets ready for the day of her life. I hear anticipation. I hear a nervousness. I see a priest, Moses, who is uniting the people with their God. I hear vows that are spoken at an altar that is lit on fire. I see a reception. I see a house. They're moving in. And I start to think, is this whole story an illustration of marriage? Or is marriage an illustration of this? Is this the bigger story to which all marriage should point? Are you there? Scene 2, Jesus, John chapter 2. I could tell the story in 5 sentences. Here we go. On the 3rd day, there was a wedding. They've run out of wine. Do whatever he tells you. Whoa. Okay, I added that. The water has been turned to wine. You've saved the best for last. That's the whole story. If John were telling it, it'd go something like this. As I remember, it was the 3rd day. And there was a wedding. Jesus' mother was there, and Jesus was there. And in fact, we were all there, and half the village was there. Weddings were like that. The family was poor. No sooner had the wedding started when they ran out of wine. No one knew it. The cups were still full. But those that were close to the sources knew it was gone. The family was only hours away from the most embarrassing day of their lives. Somebody told Jesus' mother, and Jesus' mother went to Jesus and said, "We have a problem. They ran out of wine." And Jesus said, "Woman, what is that to you and me?" I don't know how you fix that sentence. That's just abrasive. So I looked it up, and I think there's got to be a way. No, there is no way. It's just as crass as it sounds. He says, "Woman, what is that between you and me? My time is not yet come." But Mary isn't having it. She's not going to argue with her son. He's not going to argue with her. Have you ever won an argument with your mother? Probably not. So she just pivots and says to the servants, "Just do whatever he tells you." Now, nearby, there were 6 large water jugs, stone, not clay. Each one held 20 to 30 gallons. So that's 120 to 180 gallons. But they were mostly gone because these jars were used for ceremonial cleansing. And ceremonial cleansing was a ritual in which the bride purified herself before the wedding. It was like a bath. In the ceremony, she cleansed not only her body, she was symbolizing the cleansing of her soul, her spirit, her mind, so that what she gave to her husband in the wedding would be pure. Most of the water was gone. What she didn't use was used for the guests because they'd come off the road. We'd wash their feet, their hands. Now they were clean. And so the servants went out and they filled those 6 water jars with water right up to the brim. And Jesus, without batting an eye, said to the servants, "All right, now take some of the water from the jars and bring it to the master of ceremony." They might have argued about it, I'm not sure, but the servants finally did it. They took some from, and they gave it, and when he tasted it, he said, "Oh, this is wine. Where did you get this?" Because nobody knew where it came from. Normally, he said, we serve the best at the beginning, and then after the audience has maybe had too much to drink, then we serve the cheap stuff. You've actually saved the best stuff for the last. We thought we had the best. You've shown us the best is yet to come. John never tells us the meaning of the story. But if you have Exodus 19 in your memory, you can start to read into it. Maybe you think to yourself, the whole Christian life is more like a wedding, and I've made it more like a trial. I think of it as a courtroom that ends in a trial, but maybe it's a chapel that ends in an altar where God is joined with the people he chose, the ones he loved. I don't know about you, but the story I heard about salvation growing up went something like this. God is holy and you are not. Therefore, you need someone to stand in for you, for there is coming a day of judgment where you will stand before a holy God, and that judge getting ready to judge your life will hear the voice of a defense attorney, an advocate for you, will speak from the back and say, Father, wait a minute. I know this person. I can vouch for him. If you suspend judgment and let him go free, I promise he will never appear in this courtroom again. Did you hear something like that? Man, I did. The problem is that if you're conservative, and I was, then you fill your life with little rules. So you don't do anything to tick off the defense attorney, because the last thing you want is for him to get mad at you. It doesn't matter how well he knows you. It just matters that he knows you, and he can vouch for you in the day of judgment when you need it. If you're not conservative, you were born maybe or raised differently, then you had no trouble believing that you were loved from the very start. But love for you covers a multitude of sins. Therefore, no matter what you do, as long as Jesus vouches for you in the end, you are good. Try, but don't be so hard on yourself. What both of those have in common is they never really change a person, do they? They all talk about life as though it ends in this trial, as if you can just get past the judge, then you can live happily ever after. What the stories hint at is that Jesus is never so much a judge as he is a spouse. And these commandments are not laws, they're vows. And that holiness is not piety, it's semblance, it's likeness. Prayer is not devotions. It's a conversation between two people who know each other really well. Maybe what you're hearing is that we are, all of us, who are in Christ, headed toward a wedding. We live in the day of preparation, the day before, when the bride gets ready. Only the water of ceremonial cleansing has been turned into wine. You don't just splash it, you drink it. It's not something external. It's something you imbibe, and it is in you. There's nothing wrong with the rituals of ceremonial cleansing. Christians everywhere, and I bet you do too, I do, crave ceremonial cleansing. Every time we want more of something, we say, how do you do it? And when someone gives us the instructions, we turn them into rules and then believe by practicing those rules, we will actually have the thing that we want. Good as it is, it's ceremonial cleansing. So all of the things that you grew up avoiding, you know they're not enough. All of the rituals, the habits that you think will shape a better character, you know in your heart they're not enough. They might wash away the stain, but they cannot fill you. They can remove something, but they can't create something that wasn't there before. That takes a miracle. How are you doing? All right? If this is the day of preparation, then the word of the Lord to the people of God is do whatever he tells you. You say, I think I know what that is. You know exactly what that is. Before you stopped listening, you knew exactly what that was. And some decided you couldn't do it, so maybe I never heard it. We know exactly what he wants us to do. Whatever he tells you. And that's different for everyone. Do it. And it will lead you to life. Your life will get bigger, even if you think it will make you smaller. Yet, this is the day of preparation, which means tomorrow is the wedding. We're not there yet, but almost. We live on the eve of the wedding when God joins himself once and for all with his people. Today, the world does not know us. How does John say it? It does not yet appear what we shall be. But tomorrow, when he appears, we will be like him. Today we are dwelling below. Our minds are above, but we are still dwelling below. But tomorrow, when he is revealed, Paul says in Colossians 3, we will also be revealed with him in glory. This day is almost over. The night has almost passed. The wedding is already upon us. Prepare yourself for the day. There, at the end of the Bible, there's this brilliant scene where millions of people are gathered. They're from every tribe and nation. And they're gathered around the throne. And the 24 elders are bowing down before the one on the throne. And then the one on the throne speaks, and this is what he says. He says, rejoice, O people of God, both great and small, for the wedding supper of the Lamb has come, and the bride has made herself ready. Even now, she stands in white. Blessed are those invited to the wedding feast of the Lamb. Before every wedding in this church, the night before is a rehearsal. It's smaller. It's usually family. Everyone knows each other. But the mood is festive, loud, happy, because it's full of anticipation of the real one that's going to come the following day. After the rehearsal, we go down the hall or to a restaurant and we have what's called a rehearsal dinner. Have you seen these? It's small, close. People are telling stories. The mood is festive again, but it's in anticipation of the reception on the following day when the crowd is invited. I'd like you to think this morning of communion as a rehearsal dinner.